Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something really fundamental. It's about the human experience itself.
We have some really interesting material here. An AI source actually termed it the universal human experience of perceived value and resource asymmetry.
Okay, yeah, that's a mouthful, but let's break it down. Because it really gets to why, we're all human, but some people seem to be thriving and others, well, they feel constantly undermined or just struggling.
And that word universal is key, isn't it?
It really is.
The analysis suggests this isn't just like one society's problem or something new. It seems baked into being human.
Right, across genders, ages, cultures.
It's everywhere. So our mission today is basically to pull out the core ideas, the really important bits about this whole dynamic.
Exactly. And it's not just about who has more money or stuff, although that's definitely part of the picture. It goes deeper into how much value we feel we have, our own sense of worth, and how that connects with the uneven spread of, well, everything. Resources, opportunities, even respect. The AI calls these privileges.
Yeah, feeling valued and having access often go hand in hand, don't they?
They really seem to.
So the AI source outlines these two connected sides. Perceived value, that's your internal feeling of mattering.
Your subjective sense. Yeah.
And resource asymmetry, which is just the plain fact that stuff isn't shared out equally.
Right. Tangible things like food and shelter, but also intangible things like, opportunities or social standing.
A good example that jumps out is the whole pay gap discussion.
Oh, definitely.
It kind of reflects both things, doesn't it? Maybe a lower perceived value put on certain jobs, and then the very real resource asymmetry in paychecks.
Exactly. And it's way broader than just gender. I mean, think about how different societies treat the very young and the very old.
That's a great point.
In some places, elders are really revered, right? That's a kind of appreciated privilege based on their experience.
Wisdom, yeah.
But in other places, they might face neglect, isolation. It's a stark contrast.
And same with kids. How much does society invest in its youth versus, sadly, situations like child labor? That's resource asymmetry right there, across age groups.
And connecting this out, you see every culture sort of develops its own internal hierarchies, its own rules, often unwritten, about what's valuable and who gets what.
Yeah, and these aren't just random. They get woven into social structures, into norms over long periods.
And history is just full of it, isn't it? Ancient empires, modern capitalism. It's the same basic dynamic of unequal power and resources playing out again and again.
So the big question then is why? What's driving this?
Well, the AI points to some really core human stuff. First off, just the basic drive to survive and, be okay.
Avoid pain, seek well-being.
Yeah.
The fundamentals.
Right. It kind of makes sense that this would lead us to want more resources, a better position in the group.
And that brings in the social angle. We're social creatures, right? We don't live in a vacuum.
Not at all.
So the AI highlights social comparison. We're constantly looking around, seeing how we stack up against others.
That comparison thing is huge.
And it massively shapes how we feel about our own value and what we have. It's often not just, do I have enough? But do I have as much as them?
Yeah, that tendency to measure ourselves against the Joneses or whoever. It's powerful.
And then you mix in the fact that resources are often limited, so there's competition.
Right.
But we also need to cooperate to get things done.
It's that tension, isn't it? Competition and cooperation.
Exactly. And that interplay often leads to forming groups, in-groups, out-groups. And, well, some groups end up with more advantage of those privileges again.
While others are left out feeling undermined.
Precisely. And when you look at specific areas like biology and genetics, the effects become clearer.
How so?
Well, evolution doesn't consciously choose winners, but traits that boost survival and reproduction tend to get passed along more.
Okay.
The AI notes this can sort of unintentionally contribute to imbalances. Some individuals might just be, genetically a bit better suited for a particular environment or task.
So our basic genetic lottery can play a subtle role.
It interacts with the environment, yeah. It's not destiny, but it can influence outcomes and access to those privileges. We're not all starting from the exact same biological point.
And then there's that basic biological need. The AI mentions homeostasis, keeping our bodies stable and healthy.
Right, our internal balance.
Big differences in resources, well, that directly impacts our ability to meet those fundamental needs, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the AI points out the chronic stress of feeling undermined or lacking essentials that has real physical health consequences, increased risk of diseases, things like that.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit to psychology, no big surprise here. This stuff messes with our heads, right?
No, absolutely. It has a huge impact on our emotions.
The AI connects feeling valued and secure with, happiness, contentment.
And feeling undervalued or deprived.
Yeah.
That links to sadness, anger, anxiety, the whole range of negative feelings.
Frustration, yeah.
And what's really interesting is how the AI directly links those feelings to whether we feel appreciated or undermined.
That makes sense. It's a powerful driver, too.
Definitely. Wanting those appreciated privileges or just needing to escape feeling undermined that motivates us to achieve, to strive.
Or, unfortunately, sometimes it leads to feeling hopeless, maybe resentful.
Yeah. And it takes a toll on mental health over time. The AI is clear. Chronic inequality and feeling devalued are major risk factors for things like depression and anxiety.
It's not just the outside circumstances, but how they make us feel inside.
Exactly. And our own minds can sort of rationalize these imbalances. Cognitive biases, the AI calls them.
Like that just world idea.
Yeah, the just world fallacy. That belief that deep down people get what they deserve. It can be comforting, but often just not true.
And confirmation bias. We look for evidence that confirms what we already think about who's privileged and why.
Right, even if our view isn't totally accurate, we stick to it.
So zooming out now to society, culture, these individual feelings, they get writ large, don't they?
Massively. Social hierarchies, the AI says, are basically a direct outcome of this asymmetry in resources and perceived value. Society kind of organizes itself based on who has what and who's seen as more important.
Often, implicitly, yeah.
And cultural norms play a huge role in defining what even is a privilege in the first place and what's considered fair.
Right. Fairness looks different depending on the culture.
And our justice systems are supposed to address imbalances, ensure some fairness, though, the reality can be patchy.
And different economic systems like capitalism versus socialism, the AI points out they create really different patterns of privilege and who gets undermined.
Definitely. It even filters down into our closest relationships.
Like parents wanting better for their kids than they had.
Exactly. Trying to give them advantages, those privileges. Or think about sibling rivalry.
Oh, yeah. That feeling of it's not fair.
Often comes down to perceived unfairness in how resources, maybe toys, maybe even just attention are given out and valued.
And outside the family, friendships, work colleagues, neighbors.
It's all subtly influenced by these comparisons, this quiet competition for status, for resources.
And things like education, wealth, they often just reinforce existing cycles, don't they? Giving some people easier access to more opportunities.
It definitely can create feedback loops. And looking back through history, you see this dynamic just fueling massive events.
Like revolutions, the French Revolution, for instance.
Classic example, driven by huge disparities. Wars, too often fought over resources, or conflicting ideas about who deserves power and privilege.
And social movements, like the civil rights movement.
Fundamentally, about challenging a system that systematically undermined a whole group, denied them basic rights and privileges.
So that drive for a better life, which often means getting more privileges, it's been this engine for progress, but also for terrible conflict.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure. A really complex force in human history.
It really gets you thinking about philosophy, ethics, belief systems. How do they grapple with all this?
Well, the AI explains that ethics and morality are constantly wrestling with justice and fairness precisely because the world is so unequal. What we consider right or wrong is deeply tied to how we handle these imbalances.
And truth and lies can become tools in this game.
Absolutely. People might distort the truth to gain or keep privileges, or conversely, truth-telling can be a way to challenge unfairness.
Like bearing witness.
Exactly. And religion, faith. The AI notes they offer ways to understand suffering, find comfort, provide moral codes.
But sometimes those codes might end up reinforcing existing power structures, even unintentionally.
That can happen, yeah. It's complex. It's all woven together. Even our search for purpose in life can be shaped by where we see ourselves in this landscape of value and resources.
And it's wild that the AI even brings in things like math and logic. How do they help understand this?
Well, math gives us tools to measure it, like the Gini coefficient example the AI used that puts a number on income inequality.
Right, country A versus country B makes it concrete.
And logic helps us build arguments about fairness, but also spot the fallacies people use to justify unfairness. Ad hominem attacks, appeals to tradition, things like that.
And physics, entropy, how does that connect?
It's more metaphorical. Like, entropy is the tendency towards disorder. It takes constant energy to maintain order and structure, whether it's a physical system or, social well-being and fairness. It requires effort against the natural drift.
Okay, so let's drill down into the why again. Why does this system of undermined and appreciated privileges exist at all?
The AI lists several factors. A big one is just basic scarcity.
Right. There isn't infinite everything for everyone.
And scarcity naturally breeds competition, not just for food or land, but for status, recognition, those intangible privileges too.
And then you get power dynamics. People who get power tend to shape things to benefit themselves and their group.
That tends to happen, yeah. It reinforces the asymmetry. And don't forget social constructs.
Meaning what we decide is valuable as a society.
Exactly. What skills, what backgrounds, what qualities we prize, those decisions have huge consequences for who gets ahead and who might get left behind.
And while people do have different abilities and contribute differently,
the AI rightly cautions that how we value those contributions is itself often socially decided.
Right, like care work being essential but maybe not paid like finance work.
Precisely. And then there's just sheer luck, where you're born, who you're born to.
Yeah.
That's a huge factor in your starting point.
It seems like a lot of it boils down to that basic human wish to relieve pain, live longer, be wealthy, healthy, as the AI puts it.
Yeah, that fundamental drive. But in a world of limits, pursuing that can, maybe inevitably, lead to disparities if people try to secure those advantages.
And looking at human actions, the AI touches on things like drugs or alcohol, sometimes being ways people cope with feeling undermined.
Maladaptive coping, yeah. Or behaviors like greed, lying.
Yeah.
May be seen as shortcuts to grab resources or status in a competitive system.
While truth, faith, ethics, they offer different ways to navigate it all.
Hopefully more constructive ways. So who wins and who loses in this system?
Well, it seems obvious that those with the appreciated privileges generally do better. Better health, more opportunities, maybe more well-being overall.
Generally, yes. But the AI also adds a nuance. Being privileged doesn't guarantee happiness or protect you from other kinds of suffering. Pressure, maybe emptiness.
True, but for those consistently undermined, the costs are usually much clearer and more severe.
Oh, definitely. Poorer health, fewer chances, the constant stress of fighting the system. It's often a really stark difference.
Which brings us right back to ethics, doesn't it? What's fair? How should we value each other?
Fundamental questions. The AI points out that most ethical systems, in one way or another, argue for some basic level of dignity and well-being for everyone. Human rights, essentially.
And when we see cruelty, lack of empathy, the AI suggests it often involves dehumanizing the other person.
Yeah, making it easier to ignore their suffering or even take away their rights, their privileges, even their life. That lack of a basic sense of humanity, it's a dangerous thing.
It really highlights why we need to actually believe this dynamic is real and has consequences. If we ignore it, how can we fix it?
Which is where the AI perspective comes in. It can't feel privilege or disadvantage, obviously.
Right, no lived experience.
But its strength is analyzing huge amounts of data, spotting patterns humans might miss.
That's the potential, isn't it? Finding hidden biases in hiring or loans or the justice system, things that create unfair advantages.
Exactly, identifying the systemic stuff. And it's not just about spotting problems. The AI suggests ways it could help improve things.
Like personalized education to build empathy.
Yeah, or using simulations to help policymakers figure out fairer ways to distribute resources. Using that logical, data-driven approach.
Maybe even helping bridge cultural gaps through better communication tools, understanding different views on fairness.
That's a possibility. And more directly, things like AI help in design fairer resource allocation systems, though that needs careful ethical oversight, of course.
Of course. Or using VR for empathy training. Personalized support for mental health or learning.
All potential applications. But the AI is realistic too. It's not about creating some perfect utopia with no problems.
Life will always have challenges.
Right. The goal is more about reducing unnecessary suffering, increasing opportunities for people to flourish. And AI could help deconstruct bad arguments that prop up inequality, help build stronger ethical frameworks.
And maybe on an individual level, provide easier access to info on coping strategies or basic mental health support for those feeling ground down by it all.
Like a readily available resource, yeah. So let's quickly hit those specific questions from earlier. When did it all start?
The AI thinks likely way back, dawn of self-awareness, social interaction, when we could start comparing mine versus yours.
And it probably got much more intense with agriculture, settlements, having actual surplus resources to argue over.
Makes sense. And basic human needs food, water, shelter.
We need those physiologically, sure. But the AI distinguishes that from how much we want. That desire often goes way beyond basic needs and gets driven by social comparison, wanting those privileges.
We notice what we lack compared to others.
Often more than just appreciating what we have. And who's benefited most historically.
Generally, those who got power and control over resources. But as you said, the AI adds the caveat that wealth doesn't automatically equal happiness.
Right. It's nuanced. And why aren't kids explicitly taught this stuff?
The AI suggests maybe it feels too harsh, too complex, or maybe adults are just uncomfortable with it themselves or don't fully get it.
It stresses teaching fairness, empathy, critical thinking in age-appropriate ways is crucial. Kids pick up on the implicit stuff anyway.
True. And death, how does that factor in?
Well, it ends the individual's striving and suffering within this system. For the living, maybe AI can help us think about meaning and legacy beyond just accumulating stuff.
And why do people react so differently? Like, even to humor?
It just shows how personal it all is, right? Our reactions depend entirely on our own experiences within this whole landscape of value and resources.
Totally context dependent. And the physical aspect.
That's the tangible stuff, resources, our body's needs, the actual physical effects of stress or well-being, and physical labor itself.
And finally, freedom. We believe in freedom, but...
But the AI reminds us our actual freedom to act is often limited by these very asymmetries in resources and power we've been talking about.
So wrapping this up, this whole universal human experience of perceived value and resource asymmetry, it really is fundamental, isn't it? And deeply complex.
It shapes so much, individual lives, societies, history, for better and for worse.
And AI, while it can't feel it, offers this powerful analytical lens, a way to see the patterns more clearly based on data.
Yeah, a tool for understanding these dynamics perhaps more comprehensively than we could before.
And the hope, maybe, is that with more awareness, more empathy, maybe we can move towards fairer systems, empower individuals more.
Use that understanding to build something better. It certainly changes how you look at the world once you start thinking about it this way.
It really does. Things look different.
You start seeing these dynamics playing out everywhere.
And maybe that's the final thought for you, listening. How do your own perceptions of value, your own relationship with resources, shape how you see the world and interact with others?
Yeah. And could understanding this dynamic more deeply, even just personally, lead towards a more compassionate approach?
Yeah.
A more just world, starting with ourselves.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
This is DigitView.